I thought the hardest part was watching my grandmother fade in hospice until I saw the brand new car in the driveway. My parents claimed it was a gift for my sister's future, but they bought it with the inheritance money Grandma left specifically for me. They believed she was too weak to know and I was too obedient to speak up. Then Grandma made one call and said the words that caused my entire family to crumble like sand. My name is Ember Watson. I am 29 years old, and if you looked at my life on paper, you would call it functional. I am a nursing coordinator at a rehabilitation clinic in downtown Richmond. I pay my own rent. I drive a sedan that is 6 years old and reliable. I have a credit score that I monitor obsessively, and a cat named Barnaby who offers me more emotional consistency than my entire immediate family combined. I live a life of careful, quiet independence. It is a small life. It is a safe life. But as I stood in the sterile hallway of the hospital, watching my parents navigate the corridor like they were walking a red carpet, rather than visiting a dying woman, I realized that safety is just an illusion we tell ourselves to sleep at night. The call had come in at 10 in the morning. My grandmother, Vivian Hale, had taken a turn. The doctors used words like rapid decline and transition of care. They were moving her to a hospice facility on the outskirts of the city. I had dropped a stack of patient files, left my coffee on the desk, and driven 40 minutes with my heart hammering against my ribs. Vivian was 77. She was the only person in my bloodline who looked at me and saw a human being rather than an investment return. When I arrived, the family meeting was already in progress near the nurses' station. It looked less like a medical crisis and more like a board meeting for a failing company where everyone was trying to save face. My father, Grant, was wearing a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my first car. He was checking his watch, a heavy silver piece that caught the fluorescent lights. My mother, Celeste, stood next to him. She was wearing a cream-colored cashmere cardigan and pearls, her posture rigid, her face composed into a mask of appropriate, tasteful grief. And then there was Brielle, my sister, 25 years old and glowing with the kind of health that only extreme wealth and zero responsibility can buy. She was tapping away on her phone, her thumb moving in a blur, likely updating her social circle about the tragedy unfolding in real time. They looked like a portrait, the perfect American family dealing with a sad, inevitable loss. I was the smudge on the lens. I was wearing my scrubs navy blue, practical, and stained with a drop of coffee near the hem. I had not had time to change. Grant saw me first. He did not hug me. He did not ask how I was. He simply nodded, acknowledging my arrival as one acknowledges the delivery of a package. "Ember, you are here," he said. His voice was a deep baritone, the voice he used to close deals and intimidate waiters. "Good. We need to discuss the schedule." I blinked, shifting my weight. The air smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. "How is she?" I asked. "Is she conscious?" Grant waved a hand dismissively. "She is stable for the transport. The doctors say it is a matter of weeks, maybe days. It is a waiting game now." Celeste chimed in, her voice soft but laced with that familiar, icy edge. "We have arranged for the best hospice suite available, the VIP wing. It is very private. We need to make sure everything looks right. Everything looks right. Not feels right, not is right, looks right." That was the family motto. "We cannot be there 24 hours a day," Grant continued, pulling a small leather notebook from his pocket. He did not look at me. He looked at his list. "I have meetings with the investors all week. Your mother has the charity gala preparations. Brielle is busy." I looked at Brielle. She was still looking at her phone, a small smile playing on her lips. She looked up, caught my eye, and shrugged. "Trevor and I are going to the vineyard this weekend," she said. "His parents are flying in. You know how important that is." Ember. Trevor was the new boyfriend. He came from old money, the kind of money that owned buildings and senators. My parents treated Brielle's relationship with him not as a romance, but as a merger acquisition. "So," Grant said, snapping the notebook shut, "you will take the daily shifts. Ember, you can go in the mornings before work, or in the evenings. Ideally both. You are the best fit for this." I felt a hot flush of indignation rise up my neck. Dad, I work full-time. I run the coordination for 40 patients. I cannot just drop everything to be a bedside nurse. Grant looked at me then. Really looked at me. His eyes were cold, assessing. Your job is flexible. Ember, you work in administration. It is not like you are a surgeon. You shuffle papers. The dismissal was swift and absolute. My career. The one I had built without their help. The one that paid for my apartment and my food. Was nothing to him. It was a hobby, a placeholder, until I found a husband or disappeared. Besides, Celeste added, smoothing the front of her cardigan, you are so good with sick people. It is your nature. Brielle is too sensitive for this. She gets overwhelmed easily. You are stronger. Stronger. That was their code word for expendable. That was their word for the pack mule who carried the emotional baggage so the show ponies could run free. I cannot do every day, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I can do evenings, but I have a life. Dad? Grant sighed, an exasperated sound that made me feel 5 years old again. Do not be difficult. Ember, not now. This is for your grandmother. Do you want her to be alone? The guilt trip, the precision strike. He knew I adored Vivian. He knew I would walk through fire for her. He was weaponizing my love for her to secure his own convenience. Fine, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I will handle the evenings. But I cannot stay past 10. I have shifts starting at 6 in the morning. Grant nodded, already turning back to his phone. Good. That is settled. We will handle the weekend if we are in town. They began to move, a synchronized unit of indifference. Brielle tucked her phone into her designer bag. Thanks, Em, she said breezily. You are a lifesaver. Give Grandma a kiss for me. I watched them walk toward the elevators. They walked with entitlement etched into every step. As the elevator doors began to slide shut, I heard my mother's voice. She thought the doors were closed enough. She thought I was out of earshot. Well, she said, her voice carrying that distinct, sharp clarity. At least she is useful right now. The doors clicked shut. I stood there in the hallway, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. Useful, not loved, not appreciated. Useful, like a wrench, like a dish rag. I took a breath, holding it until my lungs burned, and then exhaled. I turned and walked toward the hospice transport team. I had a job to do. I always had a job to do. The hospice facility was located in a quiet, wooded area north of Richmond. It was a renovated estate, beautiful in a melancholy way. The room my parents had booked the VIP suite was large, with bay windows overlooking a garden where the leaves were just starting to turn gold and russet. But inside the room, the air was different. It did not smell like a hospital. It smelled of lavender oil and old paper. My grandmother insisted on having her books, even dying. She needed her books. Vivian Hale was lying in the bed, propped up by 3 pillows. She was small, her body ravaged by the cancer that had been eating at her for a year. But her eyes were the same. They were sharp, blue, and terrifyingly intelligent. Vivian had built the family fortune alongside my grandfather. She knew where every dollar came from, and she knew exactly who was waiting to spend it. I walked to the side of the bed. She turned her head, and her face softened. Ember, she whispered. Her voice was thin, like paper rustling, but the diction was precise. Hi, Grandma, I said. Pulling the chair close, I sat down and took her hand. Her skin felt like parchment, dry and cool. I am sorry I'm late. There was a meeting. Vivian let out a short, dry sound. A laugh. A meeting. Let me guess. Grant assigned you the heavy lifting. Celeste complained about the lighting, and Brielle was checking her engagement prospects. I smiled. Despite the ache in my chest, you are batting 1,000. Vivian squeezed my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. They are predictable. Ember. That is their weakness. They think everyone operates on their currency, greed and appearance. She closed her eyes for a moment. Gathering strength, I watched the rise and fall of her chest under the thin blanket. I felt a surge of panic. I was not ready for her to go. She was the only one who saw the truth. Without her, I was just the useful daughter in a family of decorative objects. She opened her eyes again and fixed them on me. "Listen to me," she said. The tone was serious now. The playfulness was gone. "I am listening." I said, "I have arranged things," she said. Her gaze drilled into me. "For you?" I shook my head. "Grandma, I do not want hush." She cut me off. "Do not give me that humble nonsense. I am not talking about charity. I am talking about survival." She gestured with a trembling hand toward the nightstand. "The top drawer. Open it." I hesitated, then reached out and pulled the drawer open. Inside, amidst a few bottles of pills and a rosary, lay a thick cream-colored envelope. It was sealed with wax. On the front, in her shaky but elegant handwriting, were the words, "When you are forced to choose?" I stared at it. "What is this?" Vivian took a breath that rattled in her chest. "That is your instruction manual. And your weapon, my weapon." I looked at her, confused. "Grandma, what are you talking about?" She pulled me closer, forcing me to lean in. "There is an inheritance, Ember, a specific one. Not the house, not the stocks that Grant is already drooling over. Liquid assets. Money I put aside a long time ago. It is legally yours. It has been yours since you turned 25. But I kept the trust quiet because I know your father." She paused, swallowing hard. I put a cup of water to her lips, and she took a small sip. "Grant and Celeste," she continued, wiping her mouth. "They think I am senile. They think I am too weak to notice the paperwork they shove under my nose. They think you are too obedient to question them. They are banking on it. Literally." I felt a chill run down my spine. The conversation in the hallway came back to me. "Useful. That envelope," Vivian said, pointing a crooked finger at the drawer. "You do not open it yet. You keep it. You hide it. Because the moment I am gone, the masks are going to fall off. They are going to squeeze you. Ember. They are going to try to take everything because they believe they deserve everything." I took the envelope out of the drawer. It felt heavy. There was something solid inside. Maybe a key or a drive, along with papers. "Why didn't you tell them I asked? Why didn't you just give it to me before? Because you needed to see it," she said softly. "You needed to see them clearly. Without me standing in the way. You have spent your whole life trying to earn their love. Ember, you think if you work hard enough, if you are useful enough, they will finally look at you the way they look at Brielle." Tears pricked my eyes. It was a truth I barely admitted to myself, and she spoke it like a weather report. "They won't," she said brutally. "They cannot. They are empty people. Honey, and you? You are full. You are full of fire. That scares them." She squeezed my hand again. "This inheritance. I did not leave it to you so you could buy a house or a car. I left it to you so you could buy your freedom. You are going to need it to live true to yourself, to walk away when the time comes." I slipped the envelope into the pocket of my scrub top. It felt like a burning coal against my ribs. "I will keep it safe, I promised." Vivian smiled. A tired, ghostly thing. "No, Ember, it will keep you safe." We sat in silence for a while. The sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the room. I watched the light move over the spines of her old books. I thought about my father's cold assessment of my career. I thought about my mother's whispered insult. I thought about Brielle's indifference, and I touched the envelope in my pocket. "You should go," Vivian whispered after an hour. "You have work in the morning, and you need to hide that before you go home." I stood up and kissed her forehead. Her skin smelled of lavender and inevitable goodbyes. "I will be back tomorrow," I said. "I know," she said. "You are the only one who will be." I walked out of the hospice facility into the cooling evening air. The parking lot was nearly empty. I got into my 6-year-old sedan and sat there for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. It was a text from my mother. "Make sure you updated the nurses about the dietary restrictions, and do not forget to pick up Brielle's dry cleaning on your way to work tomorrow. It is on your route." I stared at the screen, the command, the assumption, the utility. I reached into my pocket and touched the wax seal of the envelope. When you are forced to choose. I had always thought choice was something you made when you had options. But as I started the engine sputtering slightly before catching, I realized my grandmother was teaching me something else. Sometimes, a choice is not about selecting an option, it is about sharpening a blade. I put the car in reverse and pulled out. I did not reply to my mother's text. For the first time in 29 years. I let the silence hang there, heavy and pregnant with things unsaid. I drove home in the dark, the envelope burning against my side, unaware that the first cut had already been made, and the bleeding was about to begin. The routine settled in quickly, like a heavy fog that refused to lift. For the next 10 days, my life became a pendulum swinging between the sterile, fluorescent reality of the rehab clinic and the quiet, lavender-scented twilight of the hospice. I would work my shift, coordinating care plans for stroke victims and post-operative patients, and then I would drive 40 minutes to sit by a bed that seemed to grow larger as the woman inside it grew smaller. My parents did not share this routine. To them, the hospice was not a place of transition. It was a management project. It was a checklist item that needed to be handled with maximum efficiency and minimum emotional expenditure. I sat in the corner of the room on a Tuesday evening, watching the rain streak against the glass of the bay window. Vivian was asleep, her breathing shallow but rhythmic. I had brought a book, but I had not turned a page in an hour. Instead, I found myself dissecting the past, trying to pinpoint the exact moment I had become the invisible daughter. It was not one big explosion. It never is. It was a slow accumulation of silences. I was the child who did her homework without being asked. I was the teenager who never missed curfew. I was the college student who worked 2 jobs to pay for textbooks, so I would not have to ask for money. In a family that thrived on drama and display. My competence made me boring. I did not bring home trophies from beauty pageants like Betrayal. I did not date the sons of senators. I simply existed, reliable and sturdy, like a piece of furniture you only notice when you need to rest your feet. My mother, Celeste, loved things that shined. She loved accolades she could wear like jewelry. My nursing career was respectable. She would say at dinner parties, but the way she said it always sounded like an apology. Ember is so practical. She would tell her friends, signaling that I was the disappointment they did not need to worry about. Vivian stirred, pulling me from the memory. Her eyes opened, focusing on the ceiling before drifting to me. "You are thinking too loud," she murmured. Her voice was stronger today, a temporary rally that the doctors warned me not to trust. I smiled, closing my book, just watching the rain. "Grandma." Vivian shifted, wincing slightly as her joints protested. She looked at me with that gaze that stripped away every defense I had. "You are thinking about them." I did not have to ask who them was. "I just do not understand." I admitted. The words tasted bitter. They treat this place like it is an inconvenience. Dad called the nurse station 3 times today to complain about the Wi-Fi signal. Mom is worried the upholstery in the lobby looks depressed. They are not here for you. They are here to supervise the exit strategy. Vivian let out a dry chuckle. That is the Hale way. Ember, if you cannot control it, you manage it. And if you cannot manage it, you ignore it until it goes away. She motioned for water. I held the straw to her lips, watching her drink. When she pulled away, her expression was hard. "I was like you once," she said. I frowned. You built a dynasty. People were terrified of you." Vivian shook her head slowly. "Not in the beginning. When I married your grandfather, his family looked at me like I was a stain on the carpet. I was a teacher's daughter. I had no connections. I had no trust fund. They thought I was lucky to be allowed at the table." She paused, catching her breath. "I spent 10 years trying to please them. I hosted the parties. I laughed at their dull jokes. I wore the clothes they picked out. And one day, I realized something. They did not love me. They loved that I made them look good. It was conditional. The moment I stopped being an asset, I would become a liability. I looked down at my hands. That sounds familiar. Vivian reached out, her fingers brushing my wrist. That is why I'm telling you. You are waiting for them to wake up. Ember, you are waiting for Grant and Celeste to suddenly realize what a gem they have. You think if you just sit here every night, if you handle the doctors, if you are the good daughter, they will finally give you the approval you are starving for. She squeezed my wrist, her grip surprisingly painful. They won't. They cannot give what they do not have. That inheritance I told you about, the envelope. I nodded, feeling the phantom weight of it in my purse where I had hidden it. It is not just money, Vivian said fiercely. Money is just paper. That envelope is a door. It is the ability to walk away. It is the power to say no. You have spent your life saying yes because you were afraid they would cut you off, afraid of the cold shoulder, afraid of being left out. She leaned back, her eyes closing again. I want you to have the option to leave the table. Ember, before they decide to eat you alive. The next afternoon, Brielle finally made an appearance. I was changing the water in the flower vase when she breezed in. She was wearing a trench coat that cost more than my monthly salary and oversized sunglasses that she did not remove until she was fully inside the room. She brought a smell with her, a mix of expensive vanilla perfume and the crisp, cold air of a world where tragedy was just an aesthetic. "Oh my God," Brielle whispered, pressing a hand to her chest. She looked so fragile. She did not move toward the bed. She stood near the door, as if death was contagious. "She is dying." "Brielle," I said, my voice flat. "That is what fragile looks like." Brielle shot me a glare. "You do not have to be so morbid. Ember, I am just processing. This is really hard for me." She walked over to the bed. Vivian was asleep, her mouth slightly open. Brielle hesitated, then pulled out her phone. She adjusted her hair, making sure the lighting caught her highlights, and then reached out to gently rest her manicured hand on top of Vivian's bruised, paper-thin hand. She held the pose for 3 seconds. Snap. Then she pulled her hand back as if she had touched a hot stove. She checked the screen, swiping through filters. "I am going to post this with that quote about angels. Everyone has been so supportive. Trevor sent flowers to the house. Did Mom tell you?" "No," I said. "Mom did not mention the flowers Trevor sent to the house while Grandma is dying in a facility." Brielle rolled her eyes. "You are always so angry. It is exhausting. Look, I have to run. Trevor and I have a dinner reservation at 6, and traffic is a nightmare. I just wanted to check in. Tell her I came by." "Okay." She was gone before the door fully clicked shut. 3 minutes. She had stayed for 3 minutes. I looked at Vivian. She was still asleep, unaware that her dying body had just been used for content engagement. I felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with the hospital smell. It was the realization that to Brielle, and to my parents, Vivian was already gone. She was just a prop now. But if Brielle was indifferent, my father was predatory. Grant arrived on Thursday. He did not come to the room immediately. I found him in the hallway. Cornering Dr. Aris, the palliative care specialist, my father stood with his feet apart, dominating the space, a posture he used in boardrooms to bully junior executives. "I need a clear timeline," Grant was saying. His voice was low but carrying. "We have arrangements to make, assets to unfreeze. The bank requires a death certificate for certain transfers. But if she is incapacitated, the power of attorney should suffice for the interim moves." "Doctor." Aris looked tired. "Mr. Watson, as I explained, your mother is still lucid for periods. She is capable of making her own decisions when she is awake. We do not declare incapacity lightly." Grant made a noise of impatience. "Lucid, she is on enough morphine to kill a horse. She does not know what day it is. I need you to sign the competency waiver. It is a formality. We need to protect her estate." I stepped out from behind the pillar. "Protect it from whom?" Dad Grant spun around. His face flushed slightly, not with shame, but with annoyance at being interrupted. "Ember, I did not see you there." "Obviously," I said. I walked up to them, standing next to the doctor. Grandma knows exactly what day it is. We talked about the election this morning. She is fine. Grant narrowed his eyes. You are a nurse, Ember, not a doctor. You do not understand the legal complexities of an estate this size. If we do not move assets into the trust before she passes, the tax implications are significant. I am trying to save the family millions of dollars. He was holding a blue folder. It had the logo of First National Bank embossed on the front. His knuckles were white where he gripped it. Vivian's words echoed in my head. If they are rushing, it means they are scared. Why the rush? I asked, looking at the folder. She is not gone yet. Why are you trying to move money right now? Grant stepped closer, invading my personal space. It was a move designed to make me step back, to yield. I planted my feet. Adults are handling this. Ember, he hissed. Go fluff her pillows. Go read her a story. Leave the finances to the people who actually understand how the world works. He turned back to Dr. Aris. I expect that waiver by tomorrow. Do not make me call the hospital board. I play golf with the chairman. He walked away, his shoes clicking sharply on the linoleum. I looked at Dr. Aris. He sighed, rubbing his temples. I am not signing anything. Ember, she is lucid, but he is persistent. He is scared, I said, repeating the wisdom. Thank you. Doctor? That evening. Vivian was restless. She kept asking about her house, not the estate, but the specific items, her shawl, the photo of my grandfather in the silver frame on the mantel. I need them, she whispered. The room is too cold. The walls are too bare. I will go. I promised. I have a key. I will go tonight and bring them first thing in the morning. I drove to her house in the dark. It was a sprawling colonial in the old money district, set back from the road behind iron gates. It had always been a sanctuary for me, a place of warmth and cookies and stories. But tonight, the house felt like a tomb. I let myself in. The air was stale. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight. I didn't turn on the main lights. Feeling like an intruder in a space that was mourning its owner, I went to the living room and found the photo. I went to the coat rack and found the cashmere shawl. I was about to leave when a strange instinct stopped me, a pull, a prickle on the back of my neck. Check the bedroom, a voice in my head whispered. I walked up the grand staircase, the wood creaking under my sneakers. I went into her master suite. The bed was made perfectly, untouched. I walked to the walk-in closet. Vivian kept a small floor safe in the back, behind the rows of winter coats. She kept her jewelry there, her bonds, and the emergency cash. I pushed aside the heavy wool coats. My breath hitched. The safe door was wide open. It wasn't forced. There were no scratch marks, no signs of a drill. Someone had used the combination. I knelt down, shining my light into the black metal maw. Empty. The velvet shelves where she kept the diamond brooches were bare. The stack of bearer bonds she had shown me once gone. The thick envelopes of cash she kept for rainy days gone. I sat back on my heels, the cold floor seeping through my jeans. Grant. He had the power of attorney draft. He knew the combination, or maybe he had bullied her into giving it to him months ago during one of his administrative visits. I remembered the blue folder in his hand at the hospital. I am trying to save the family millions. He wasn't saving it. He was harvesting it. I stood up, my legs shaking. They weren't waiting for her to die. They were liquidating her existence while she was still breathing. They had stripped the house of its value just as they planned to strip the inheritance she had promised me. I grabbed the shawl and the photo, clutching them to my chest like a shield. I ran out of the house, the silence behind me screaming with the evidence of their greed. I got into my car and locked the doors, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I thought about calling the police, but what would I say? My father, the executor, took money from his mother's safe. He would claim he was securing it. He would claim he was moving it to a safety deposit box. He would have the paperwork to prove it was all management. No. Police were for crimes strangers committed. This was something else. This was a civil war. I looked at the passenger seat where the shawl lay. I thought about the envelope in my apartment. When you are forced to choose, I started the car. I wasn't just useful anymore, I was a witness. And as I drove away from the hollowed-out house, I realized that my grandmother was right. They were rushing because they were terrified. They knew there was something they couldn't control, and they were trying to bury it before it could speak. But they forgot one thing. They forgot about the nurse in the corner. They forgot about the daughter who knew how to be invisible. They forgot that I was the one holding the hand of the only person who knew where all the bodies were buried. I drove into the night, and for the first time, I didn't feel like the victim. I felt like the hunter. I stood in the center of my grandmother's study, the silence of the house pressing against my eardrums like deep water. The safe in the bedroom had been the first blow. But this room was the confirmation. The mahogany filing cabinet, which had stood like a sentinel in the corner for as long as I could remember, was unlocked. I pulled the drawers open one by one. They slid out with a hollow, metallic rattle. Empty. The hanging folders were there, green and orange tabs swaying in the draft, but the contents were gone. The legal binders, the property deeds, the heavy stock certificates that smelled of ink and history all vanished. It was not a robbery. A robber takes jewelry and electronics. A robber does not take the deed to a beach house and the 1998 tax returns. This was a surgical extraction. I ran my hand along the bottom of the drawer, my fingers coming away with nothing but gray dust. It felt less like a theft and more like an erasure. Someone had come in here and scrubbed the evidence of Vivian Hale's empire, leaving only the shell behind. I felt a phantom pain in my chest, a physical ache of loss that had nothing to do with money and everything to do with the realization that my future was being dismantled while I was busy changing bedpans and checking vitals. I pulled my phone from my pocket, my fingers trembling with a rage I did not know how to release. I dialed my mother. It rang 4 times before she picked up. Celeste, she answered. No greeting, just her name, as if she were a corporation. Mom, I said, my voice tight. I am at Grandma's house. I came to get her shawl. There was a pause on the other end, a pause that lasted exactly 2 seconds too long. Oh, she said. Her tone shifted, becoming breezy and dismissive. That is nice of you. Ember, make sure you lock the door when you leave. The alarm system is finicky. The safe is open. Mom, I said, cutting through her pleasantries. And the filing cabinet is empty. Everything is gone. Another pause. This one was shorter, sharper. We moved some things for safekeeping, Celeste said smoothly. With your grandmother being incapacitated, your father thought it was best to secure the sensitive documents. You know how cleaners and staff can be. We cannot risk identity theft. Securing them, I asked, my voice rising, or hiding them. The safe was emptied. Mom, cash, bonds, that is not securing documents. That is looting. Ember, stop it, she snapped. Her breezy tone evaporated, replaced by the steel that lay beneath. You are being dramatic. Your father is the executor. He has the legal right to manage the assets. Do not overreact. It is unbecoming. I am not overreacting. I said, I have to go. She interrupted. We have guests. Just bring the shawl. And Ember, do not make a scene at the hospice tomorrow. It upsets the nurses. The line went dead. I stared at the phone, the screen glowing in the dark study. Guests. It was 9 o'clock on a Tuesday. Who did they have over at 9 o'clock while their matriarch was dying 5 miles away? My thumb hovered over the screen. I opened Instagram. I did not follow my parents. They did not have accounts, but I followed Brielle. I refreshed her feed. A new story, posted 40 minutes ago. It was a boomerang video, a hand manicured, adorned with a diamond ring dangling a set of car keys. In the background, out of focus but unmistakable, was the interior of a luxury showroom. The caption was one word, finally. I felt the blood drain from my face. I did not go back to my apartment. I got into my car and drove toward Short Pump, the wealthy suburb where my parents lived in a house that was too big for 3 people and too cold for a family. The drive took 20 minutes. I spent every second of it gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My parents' house was a sprawling brick mansion at the end of a cul-de-sac. Every light in the house was on, but I did not look at the house. I looked at the driveway, parked right in the center. Bathed in the floodlights like a prize on a game show, was a white SUV. It was massive, a Range Rover autobiography, the kind that cost more than my entire college education. And on the hood, sitting there like a drop of blood on snow, was a giant red bow. I parked my sedan on the street, half blocking the mailbox. I did not care. I walked up the long driveway, the gravel crunching under my boots. The new car smelled of tire rubber and wax. It was pristine. It was aggressive. It was a tank built for a girl who had never fought a battle in her life. The front door opened before I could ring the bell. Grant stood there, holding a glass of scotch. He looked flushed, happy. The grief he had worn at the hospital like a costume was gone. "Ember," he said, blinking. "We did not expect you." I walked past him into the foyer. The house smelled of expensive candles and roasted meat. Celeste was in the living room, flipping through a brochure. Brielle was on the sofa, FaceTiming someone, squealing with delight. "Look who is here," Grant said, closing the door behind me. Brielle looked up. Her eyes were bright, manic with adrenaline. "Did you see it?" she asked, pointing toward the window. "Is it not gorgeous? It has a fridge in the console." Ember, a fridge. I looked at the three of them. My father, swirling his scotch. My mother, smiling benevolently at her favorite child. My sister, vibrating with unearned reward. "Where did the money come from?" I asked. The room went quiet. Brielle's smile faltered. She ended the call and lowered her phone. "Excuse me," Celeste said, closing the brochure. "The money," I repeated. "That car costs at least $150,000. Dad said business was tight last month. You said the market was volatile. So where did the cash come from to buy a luxury tank on a Tuesday?" Grant walked into the room, taking a slow sip of his drink. He looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. "It is an investment in Brielle's future," he said calmly. "She is dating Trevor now. The Vaughn family is old Richmond society. Ember. She cannot drive around in that beat-up Honda. Appearance matters. She's entering a different class. She needs to fit in. So you bought her a car to impress a boyfriend?" I asked, my voice trembling. While Grandma is lying in a hospice bed, Celeste stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Do not bring your grandmother into this. This is a parenting decision. We are securing Brielle's position. If she marries Trevor, that is security for this entire family. For you too." "Ember, you should be grateful." Grateful? I let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. "Grateful that you looted Grandma's safe?" Grant's face hardened. "Watch your mouth. I saw the empty safe." "Dad," I said, stepping forward, "I saw the empty filing cabinet, and I know about the inheritance. Grandma told me. She told me there was a specific fund, a liquid fund. She told me the approximate amount, and I am willing to bet that if I looked at the receipt for that car, the numbers would match almost exactly." I saw a flicker of something in Celeste's eyes. Fear, no. Caution. "It is family money," Celeste said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It belongs to the estate. We are the stewards of the estate. We decided that liquidating a dormant asset to invest in Brielle's tangible future was a better use of resources than letting it sit in a low-yield bond." "You stole it," I said. "You stole my inheritance. Grandma told me that money was for me. She said it was for when I needed to choose. There is nothing in writing," Grant said. He took a step toward me, his physical presence looming. "No will has been read. No trust has been executed. Until she dies, I have power of attorney. I can move assets as I see fit for the benefit of the family. You are part of the family, Ember, but you are not the priority right now. Brielle is the one with the window of opportunity." He pointed at the window, at the white car gleaming in the dark. "That car is a tool, just like your nursing degree is a tool. We paid for your degree, didn't we?" "I paid for my degree," I shouted. "I took out loans. I worked double shifts. You paid for nothing," Grant shrugged. "We housed you. We fed you. Do not split hairs. The point is, the money is spent. It is done. Brielle stood up from the sofa. She looked annoyed now. Her moment of glory tarnished by my reality check. "You are so jealous," she said, crossing her arms. "You always play the victim." Ember. "Oh, look at me. I work so hard. I am so noble. It is pathetic. Grandma would want me to be happy. She wants me to marry well. She would have given me the car herself if she could talk properly. She can talk," I said, turning on my sister. "She talks to me every day, and she is going to be very interested to hear that her emergency fund is sitting in your driveway." I turned to leave. "I am going to tell her." I said, "I am going to ask her tomorrow morning if she authorized a $100,000 gift for a girl who visited her once for 3 minutes." Grant did not move, but Celeste stepped in front of me. Her face was cold, composed, and terrifying. "You will do no such thing," she said. "Watch me," I said. Celeste smiled. It was a thin, razor-like smile. "Your grandmother is dying. Ember. Her heart is working at 20% capacity. The doctor said any sudden shock, any emotional distress could induce a cardiac event. It would kill her instantly." I froze. "If you go in there and tell her that her son stole her money," Celeste continued, her voice soft and poisonous, "you will be the one killing her. You, not us. You will be the one stopping her heart. Do you want that on your conscience? Do you want your last memory of her to be her gasping for air because you could not keep your mouth shut about money?" I stared at her. I looked at the woman who had given birth to me, and I saw a stranger. She was holding her own mother's life hostage to protect a car. "That is evil," I whispered. "That is reality," Grant said from behind me. "We are protecting her from stress. You should do the same. If you love her, you will let her die in peace. You will let her believe her family is happy and taken care of." I looked at Brielle. She was checking her phone again, bored by the conflict now that the threat had been neutralized. I felt a wave of nausea. I was trapped. If I spoke, I hurt the only person I loved. If I stayed silent, I let them win. I turned around and walked to the door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely grip the handle. "Just so you know," I said, not looking back, "she is not as weak as you think." Grant laughed, a short, dismissive bark. "She is a vegetable. Ember, go home. Get some sleep. You look terrible." I opened the door and stepped out into the night air. The white Range Rover seemed to glow in the darkness, a ghost of my grandmother's legacy. As the heavy front door began to close behind me, I heard Grant's voice. He was not talking to me. He was whispering to Celeste. "We just need to get through these few weeks," he said. "Once the certificate is signed, the rest of the accounts unlock." This was just the appetizer. The door clicked shut. I stood on the porch, the sound of the latch echoing like a gunshot. Just the appetizer. They weren't done. The car was just the beginning. They were going to strip her clean, and they were counting on my silence to help them do it. I walked down the driveway, past the red bow, past the symbol of my sister's future and my own erasure. I got into my old sedan and started the engine. They thought they had checkmated me. They thought the threat of Grandma's health would keep me quiet. And they were right, I could not cause a scene that would kill her. But they had made a mistake. They assumed the only way to fight was to scream. They forgot that the most dangerous things in the world are the ones that move in silence. I put the car in gear. I would not tell Grandma tomorrow, not in the way they feared. But I would not be silent. I needed to find out what else was in that appetizer, and I needed to find out before the main course was served. I drove away from the house, leaving the light and the noise behind, heading back into the shadows where I belonged. If they wanted me to be invisible, fine, I would be invisible, and they would never see me coming. My apartment was quiet, but it was the kind of silence that screamed. It was 3 a.m. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling fan cutting through the stagnant air, while Barnaby, my cat, slept curled against my shin. Blissfully unaware of the war happening inside my head, for 5 hours, I had been replaying the scene in the driveway. I saw the red bow on the white hood. I saw my father's arrogant shrug. I saw my sister's manic, entitled grin, but mostly, I heard my mother's voice, sharp as a scalpel, cutting into my conscience. You will be the one killing her. It was the perfect trap. They knew the one thing I valued more than justice was my grandmother's life. They had weaponized her fragility against me, if I spoke. I risked shocking her system, potentially ending her life days or weeks early. If I stayed silent, I allowed them to strip her legacy to the bone, rewarding their greed and validating their belief that I was nothing more than a doormat. I rolled over, burying my face in the pillow. I felt sick, physically sick. The guilt of knowing was heavy, like I had swallowed a stone by staying silent. Was I protecting her? Or was I an accomplice? Every minute I didn't speak. The car depreciated in the driveway. Every minute I didn't speak. My father likely moved more funds, signed more papers, erased more of Vivian Hale's existence. Then, a memory surfaced through the noise of my anxiety. It was something Vivian had said a week ago, her voice raspy but her eyes clear. If they are rushing, it means they are scared. I sat up in bed, the sheets tangling around my legs. Why buy the car now? Why empty the safe now? Why not wait until the funeral? Until the will was read, because they were racing. They were not managing an estate. They were looting a burning building. They knew that once she was gone, the legal structure might lock down. Or worse, they knew about the envelope. They knew there was a chance, however slim, that Vivian had made arrangements they could not control. So they were grabbing everything that wasn't nailed down while they still held the power of attorney, and while she was still breathing but too weak to object. They were betting on the clock. They were betting that she would die before she noticed the money was missing. They were betting that I would be too scared to tell her. I looked at the clock, 3:15. If I stayed silent, I wasn't saving her. I was helping them wait her out. I was helping them treat her living days as a countdown timer to payday. The nausea vanished, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. My mother was wrong. The truth wouldn't kill Vivian. The truth was the only thing that treated her like a human being. The silence, the deception, the patronizing idea that she couldn't handle the reality of her own family that was what killed a person's spirit long before their heart stopped. I got out of bed. I showered in the dark. I put on my scrubs. But this time, they didn't feel like a uniform of servitude. They felt like armor. I drove to the hospice facility as the sun was bleeding a pale gray light over the horizon. The roads were empty. The world was still asleep. But I was wider awake than I had been in years. When I arrived at the facility, the night shift nurses were just doing their final rounds. They waved at me, accustomed to my presence now, the good daughter. Their smiles said, the devoted granddaughter. They didn't know I was walking in there to drop a bomb. I walked down the hallway to the VIP suite. The door was cracked open. I stepped inside, expecting to find her asleep, but Vivian was awake. She was propped up against the pillows, her head turned toward the window, watching the sunrise filter through the trees. She looked incredibly small. The cancer had whittled her down to bone and spirit. Her skin was translucent, like parchment paper held up to a flame. She didn't turn when I entered, but she spoke. You are early, she said. Her voice was faint, a dry rustle of leaves. I could not sleep. I said, closing the door behind me. I walked to the chair and sat down. I didn't take off my coat. Vivian turned her head slowly. Her blue eyes locked onto mine. They were sunken, rimmed with red, but the intelligence in them was undimmed. She studied my face, reading the tension in my jaw, the dark circles under my eyes. What happened, she asked. It wasn't a casual question. It was a demand. I took a deep breath. My hands were shaking in my lap. I clenched them together to stop the tremor. I thought about Celeste's threat. You will be the one killing her. I looked at the woman who had taught me to read, who had taught me to garden, who had taught me that dignity was not something you bought but something you practiced. I owed her the truth, even if it hurt, especially if it hurt. I went to the house last night. I said, to get your shawl. Vivian didn't blink, and the safe in your closet was open. I said, "The filing cabinet in the study was empty. All the drawers were pulled out." Vivian's expression didn't change. She stared at me, waiting. I drove to Short Pump. I continued, my voice gaining strength. "There is a new car in the driveway, a white Range Rover. It had a red bow on the hood. A Range Rover." Vivian repeated. The words were neutral, devoid of judgment. "Grant said it was an investment in Brielle's future." I said, "Because she is dating Trevor Vaughn. He said she needs to fit in." He said they used family assets, liquid assets. I paused, the lump in my throat making it hard to speak. "It costs over $100,000. Grandma. Maybe nearly 200,000. It matches the amount you told me about. The inheritance." Vivian looked back at the window. She watched a bird land on the sill, twitch its head, and fly away. She didn't scream. She didn't gasp. She didn't clutch her chest. "Mom told me not to tell you." I whispered. The tears finally spilled over, hot and fast. "She said if I told you, the shock would kill you. She said I would be responsible. She said I had to let you die in peace so they could handle things." I waited. The silence in the room stretched out, agonizing and thin. I watched the monitor next to her bed, the green line tracing the rhythm of her heart. Beep, beep, beep. It remained steady. Finally, Vivian closed her eyes. She let out a long, slow sigh. It sounded like the air leaving a tire. "So they finally did it," she said softly. I leaned forward, grabbing her hand. "Grandma, I am so sorry. I should have stopped them. I should have—" "Stop," she said. Her eyes snapped open, and for a second, the old fire was there. "Do not apologize for their sins. Ember." She squeezed my hand. Her grip was weak, but the intention was iron. "I am not surprised," she said. "I knew Grant was greedy. I knew Celeste was vain. And I knew Brielle was spoiled. I knew all of that." She turned to face me fully. "I am not angry that they took the money. Ember, money is just a tool. If they needed it, I would have given it. But they stole it. And worse." Her voice dropped, becoming harder. "They thought you would be silent. That is what makes me angry. They banked on your fear. They used your love for me as a muzzle. That is the insult. They think you are weak, and they think I am a fool." She pulled her hand away and pointed to the bedside table. "Give me my phone," she said. "Grandma, you should rest," I said, panic flaring again. The doctor said, "Give me the damn phone." "Ember." I reached for the smartphone sitting on the nightstand. I unlocked it. I knew her passcode. It was my birthday and handed it to her. "Find Gordon," she said. "Gordon Price. Her lawyer." I scrolled through the contacts until I found his name. "Dial it," she commanded. "Put it on speaker." I pressed the call button. The line rang. Once, twice, 3 times. It was 7 in the morning. "Hello?" A male voice answered. He sounded awake, alert. Gordon Price was the kind of lawyer who was always awake. "Gordon," Vivian said. "Vivian." His voice softened instantly. "Is everything all right? Do I need to come to the facility?" "No," she said. "I am not dead yet." "Gordon?" "Stop using that funeral voice." I heard a soft chuckle on the other end. "Good to hear you." "Vivian, what do you need? I need you to come to the house on Saturday night," she said. "Saturday?" Gordon asked. "That is the night of Celeste's party, the birthday dinner." I froze. I had forgotten. Celeste was turning 60. The party. The event of the season. "I know." Vivian said, "That is why I want you there." There was a pause on the line. I could hear Gordon shuffling papers. "Vivian," he said cautiously, "if I show up at a family party, that is going to make a statement. That is the point," Vivian said. She took a breath, fighting for air. I watched her chest heave. She waited until the spasm passed. "Grant bought a car." "Gordon," she said, "with the liquidity fund, the safe is empty." Silence. Total, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Gordon said finally. His voice was no longer soft. It was cold. It was professional. "When did this happen yesterday?" Vivian said. Ember saw it. Okay, Gordon said. I will pull the transaction records from the trust oversight. If he moved that much cash, there is a paper trail. He likely used the power of attorney claiming emergency expenses. Vivian looked at me. Her eyes were hard. Bring everything, Gordon, she said. The original deed, the trust addendums, the medical competency evaluations from last month, all of it. You want to do this at the party? Gordon asked. In front of the guests, Vivian smiled. It was a terrifying smile. It was the smile of a woman who had nothing left to lose. They like an audience. Gordon, let us give them one. I will be there at 8, Gordon said. Rest, Vivian. I will handle the paperwork. She signaled for me to end the call. I pressed the red button. Vivian let her head fall back against the pillows. She looked exhausted, her energy spent by the brief conversation, but she looked peaceful. The anxiety that had radiated off her for weeks was gone. The waiting was over. The game had started. She looked at me through half-closed eyelids. Saturday night, she whispered. I shook my head. Grandma, I cannot go to that party. I cannot stand there and watch them drink champagne and celebrate while I know what they did. I will explode. You will go, she said. You have to go. You are my proxy, Ember. But what do I do? I asked. I am not you. I cannot stare them down like you can. Vivian reached out and touched my cheek. Her fingers were cold. You do not have to do anything, she said. You just have to be there. Stand your ground. Wear something beautiful. Do not wear those scrubs. Wear something that makes you feel like you own the room. But what if they ask me? What if they corner me? Let them, she said. Let them think they have won. Let them think you are scared. Let them think you are the dutiful, silent daughter, until Gordon walks through that door. She closed her eyes, her breathing deepening as sleep began to pull her back under. And Ember, she murmured, Yes, Grandma. Do not apologize, she said, not once, not for being late, not for being there, not for the truth. I watched her for a long time. I watched the rise and fall of her chest. I watched the sunlight creep across the floor, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. I thought about the car. I thought about the red bow. I thought about the years of being told I was useful, practical, sturdy. I stood up. I walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot. My old sedan looked tiny from here. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned off with the morning mist. I felt something else, something colder, something sharper. I would go to the party. I would wear the dress. I would drink their wine, and I would watch them fall. I turned back to the bed. Vivian was asleep. I whispered the words into the quiet room. A promise to her and a warning to them. I won't apologize. The sign on the door was discreet. Just a brass plaque that read, Gordon Price, attorney at law, polished to a dull shine. His office was located in the historic district, tucked between a bookstore and a coffee shop that smelled of roasted beans. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old leather, dust, and the gravity of secrets kept for decades. I sat in a wingback chair that felt like it had been absorbing client anxieties since the Reagan administration. Gordon Price sat opposite me. He was a man in his late 60s, with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and the calm demeanor of a bomb disposal expert. He placed a thick file on the desk between us. Vivian called me again this morning. He said, he didn't waste time with small talk. She wanted to make sure you understood the landscape before Saturday. I nodded, my hands clasped in my lap. She told me you have the papers. She told me about the liquidity fund, but I still do not understand how we can stop them. Mr. Price, Dad has power of attorney. He is the executor. Doesn't that give him the right to do whatever he wants? Gordon smiled. It was a small, tight smile. That is a common misconception. Ember, power of attorney is a tool for management, not ownership. It comes with a fiduciary duty. That means every decision Grant makes must be in Vivian's best interest. Buying a luxury vehicle for a grandchild while the principal is in hospice care. That is hard to argue as a necessary expense for Vivian's well-being. He opened the file. But that is just the surface level. Your father is playing checkers. Vivian has been playing chess for 5 years. He pulled out a document. It looked complex, full of legal jargon and stamped with official seals. Vivian came to me 3 years ago. Gordon said. She was worried. She saw the way Grant and Celeste were spending. She saw the way they treated you. She was terrified that if she got sick, they would drain the estate dry before you saw a dime. So she created a trigger. I whispered. Gordon nodded. She set up a specific trust structure. The inheritance she told you about. It is not just a pile of cash. It is a controlling interest. I frowned. Controlling interest in what? Gordon leaned forward. In the assets, the portfolio, and most importantly, the real estate. Real estate, I asked. You mean her house? Gordon looked at me over the rims of his glasses. Ember, do you know who owns the house in Short Pump? The one your parents live in. I blinked. My parents own it. They have lived there for 20 years. Gordon shook his head slowly. No, they do not. The room seemed to tilt. What do you mean, Vivian owns it? Gordon said. She bought it for them when Betrayal was born. But she never transferred the deed. She kept it in her name, under the family trust. Your parents have been living there essentially as tenants. They pay the utilities, but they do not own a single brick. I sat back, stunned. My parents, who prided themselves on their status, who looked down on anyone who rented, were living in a house they didn't own. Does Dad know? I asked. He knows, Gordon said, but he chooses to forget, and he certainly does not tell people. He leverages the address for his image, but legally, they are guests, and guests can be asked to leave. The implication hit me like a physical blow. If the trust controlled the real estate, and if the inheritance gave me controlling interest— Wait, I said, does that mean— Gordon held up a hand. Do not get ahead of yourself. We will get to the implications on Saturday. For now, you just need to know that the ground they are standing on is not as solid as they think. He shuffled another paper. This is the transaction record for the car. Grant withdrew $180,000 on Monday. He marked it as medical logistics and emergency transport. I let out a harsh laugh. A Range Rover is emergency transport. Gordon raised an eyebrow. Unless Vivian is planning to drive herself to the afterlife in style. No, it is fraud. Ember, plain and simple. And because the amount exceeds the threshold Vivian set in the trust bylaws, it triggered an automatic audit. He tapped the paper. But here is the interesting part. The withdrawal authorized by the bank required a secondary signature for an amount that large. Usually, that would be a co-trustee. Grant is the only active trustee right now besides Vivian. So how did he get the money? He used an old authorization form. Gordon said quietly, one from 2 years ago. We are looking into the timestamp, if he backdated it, or if he adjusted the validity. He has committed a felony. A felony. The word hung in the air, heavy and cold. My father, the respectable businessman, the pillar of the community, was potentially a felon. Saturday is not just a party, Gordon said, closing the file. It is an intervention. Vivian wants to give them one last chance to do the right thing, or rather, she wants to force them to see the reality they have been ignoring. He looked at me. You just need to be there. Ember, you are the catalyst. I swallowed hard. What if they kick me out? What if they won't let you speak? Gordon's eyes twinkled behind his glasses. It is hard to kick out the landlord's attorney. Ember, especially when the landlord is still alive. I left his office feeling lighter, yet terrified. The weapon Vivian had mentioned was not a knife. It was a nuke, and I was the one who had to walk it into the blast zone. Friday passed in a blur of nervous energy. I went to work, but my mind was elsewhere. I checked my phone constantly, half expecting a text from Grant saying he knew, that he had found out about my meeting with Gordon, but there was nothing, just silence. Then, on Friday evening, a notification popped up. It was Betrayal. So excited for tomorrow, Mom is going all out. We are doing it at Grandma's house because the garden is perfect right now. Can't wait for you to see the setup. At Grandma's house. I stared at the screen. They were throwing Celeste's birthday party at Vivian's house, the house they had just looted, the house where I had found the empty safe. It was the ultimate act of colonization. They weren't just taking her money, they were taking her space. They were filling her home with their friends, their noise, their celebration of themselves, while she lay dying 5 miles away. It made me sick, but it also made me resolute. If they wanted to play house in Vivian's sanctuary, they were going to have to deal with the ghost in the machine. I went to my closet. I pushed aside the scrubs, the comfortable jeans, the oversized sweaters I wore to hide myself. I needed something else, Vivian had said. Wear something that makes you feel like you own the room. I found a dress I had bought 3 years ago for a friend's wedding and never worn. It was black, simple, with a high neck and a structured fit. It wasn't flashy, it was severe, it was elegant. It looked like something a judge would wear under her robes. I tried it on. It fit perfectly. I looked in the mirror. I didn't look like the tired nurse. I didn't look like the invisible sister. I looked like a woman who had a secret. I looked like a Hale. Saturday arrived with a sky the color of bruised plums. The air was heavy, humid, promising a storm. I spent the morning at the hospice. Vivian was weak, sleeping mostly. But when she woke, she squeezed my hand. "Tonight," she whispered. "Tonight," I promised. I went home to get ready. I put on the black dress. I pulled my hair back into a tight, low bun. I applied makeup, carefully, sharp eyeliner, a dark red lip, war paint. At 6:30, my phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. "Guests are arriving at 7. Do not be late." An ember tonal check. "This is a happy occasion. Do not bring your hospice gloom. We need to present a united front for the guests. Do not ruin the family. Do not ruin the family." I looked at the text and felt a strange calm wash over me. I wasn't going to ruin the family. The family was already a ruin. They were just the only ones who didn't know it yet. I was just going to turn on the lights so everyone could see the cracks. I grabbed my purse. Inside was the envelope Vivian had given me, the one marked, "When you are forced to choose." I still hadn't opened it. I felt like tonight might be the night I needed it. I drove to my grandmother's house. The street was lined with cars. Mercedes, BMWs, Lexuses. The elite of Richmond were out in force. I pulled into the driveway. The white Range Rover was there, parked prominently near the entrance. The red bow still on the hood, shining under the porch lights like a trophy. I parked my sedan behind it, blocking it in slightly. A petty move, maybe, but it felt good. I stepped out of the car. The music was already drifting from the backyard, a jazz quartet, smooth and expensive. I could hear laughter, the clinking of glass, the murmur of polite conversation. I walked up the front steps. The door was open. I stepped into the foyer. They had transformed the house. Vivian's antique rugs were rolled up. The family photos on the hallway table, photos of Vivian and my grandfather, had been replaced with framed shots of Celeste and Betrayal. There was a massive floral arrangement in the center of the hall, lilies and orchids, smelling overwhelming and cloying. It didn't look like Vivian's home. It looked like a hotel lobby. Ember, I turned. Betrayal was coming down the stairs. She was wearing a shimmering gold dress, sequins catching the light. She looked beautiful, and she knew it. "You made it," she said, scanning me up and down. Her eyes lingered on my dress. "Wow. You look intense. Is that new old?" I said, "Where's Mom in the garden?" "Receiving court." Betrayal laughed. She grabbed my arm. "Come on, you have to see the bar. We got a mixologist from D.C. She pulled me toward the back of the house. I let her lead me. I felt like a spy in enemy territory. We stepped out onto the patio. The garden was lit with hundreds of fairy lights strung through the old oak trees. Tables were draped in white linen. Waiters circulated with silver trays. Celeste was in the center of a group of women, holding a champagne flute. She was wearing emerald green silk. She looked radiant. She looked like she owned the world. Grant was nearby, talking to a group of men in suits. He was laughing, gesturing with a cigar. They looked so secure, so comfortable. I saw Gordon standing in the shadows near the rose bushes. He was wearing a dark suit, holding a leather briefcase. He caught my eye and gave a nearly imperceptible nod. "Don't argue," he had said. "Let the papers talk." I took a breath of the humid night air. I walked over to the bar and ordered a sparkling water. I turned to face the party. The stage was set. The actors were in place. The audience was captivated. Grant raised his glass, his voice booming over the music. Everyone he called out. "If I could have your attention," the music stopped. The chatter died down. All eyes turned to him. "Tonight is about celebration," Grant said, smiling at Celeste, "about honoring the heart of our family. My beautiful wife, Celeste." Applause rippled through the crowd. Celeste beamed, waving regally. "But it is also about family legacy," Grant continued, "about the future. As many of you know, my mother, Vivian, is approaching her final days." A murmur of sympathetic noises. "So sad. Such a tragedy." Grant looked solemn. "It has been a hard time. But Vivian wanted us to celebrate life. She wanted to ensure that her grandchildren were taken care of, that the Hale name continued to shine." He gestured toward the driveway, toward the white car that was visible through the side gate. "That is why, with her blessing, we have invested in Brielle's future tonight, a symbol of the torch being passed." Applause again. Louder this time. Brielle struck a pose, looking humble and grateful. I felt a burn in my throat. With her blessing, the lie was so smooth, so practiced. I looked at Gordon. He stepped out of the shadows. He walked into the circle of light. "Excuse me," Gordon said. His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the applause like a knife. Grant froze. He looked at Gordon, confusion flickering on his face. Grant said, "What are you doing here? This is a private party." Gordon walked until he was standing next to Grant. He placed his briefcase on the table next to the birthday cake. "I am here on behalf of Vivian Hale," Gordon said. The crowd went silent. The tension in the air snapped tight. Grant laughed nervously. "Well, that is unexpected, but we are in the middle of a toast." Gordon. "Maybe we can discuss business later." Gordon opened the briefcase. The click of the latches was audible in the quiet garden. "I am afraid this cannot wait." "Grant," Gordon said. He pulled out a stack of documents. "Vivian wanted to join the celebration," Gordon said, looking around at the guests. "She wanted to clarify a few things about that torch you mentioned." He looked at me. I held his gaze. "And," Gordon continued, his voice dropping an octave, becoming grave, "she wanted to clarify exactly who has the right to be standing on this property tonight." Grant's smile vanished. Celeste lowered her glass. The appetizer was over. The main course was served, and it was going to be cold. The house was breathing, but it was not the rhythmic, comfortable breath of my grandmother. It was the shallow, manic hyperventilation of a social climbing event. I stood by the archway of the living room, holding a glass of sparkling water that I had no intention of drinking, and watched the ecosystem of my parents' ambition at work. The guest list was a strategic algorithm. There were the neighbors from the surrounding estates, invited to witness that the Watsons were still solvent and thriving. There were Grant's business partners, men in navy suits who laughed too loudly and checked their watches too often, assessing my father's standing like they were underwriting a loan. There were Brielle's friends, a flock of 20-somethings in fast fashion and heavy contour, documenting every canapé for their followers. And then there were the Vaughns, Trevor's parents, the crown jewels of the evening, held court near the fireplace. Mr. Vaughn looked like he owned a bank, which he did. Mrs. Vaughn looked like she had never dusted a surface in her life. My parents were circling them like satellites caught in the gravity of a larger, richer planet. Celeste was laughing at everything Mrs. Vaughn said, a high, tinkling sound that grated against my nerves. Grant was nodding vigorously at Mr. Vaughn, pouring wine with a hand that I noticed was shaking just slightly. They were working so hard. It was exhausted just watching them. I looked around the room, and a cold knot tightened in my stomach. Celeste had been busy. The transformation of the house was not just a cleanup, It was an exorcism. Vivian's presence had been scrubbed away. The velvet armchair where she used to read mystery novels was gone, replaced by a modern, uncomfortable-looking beige love seat that I knew my mother had rented for the night. The collection of porcelain owls on the mantelpiece tacky. Yes, but beloved by Vivian had vanished. In their place stood abstract sculptures that looked like twisted metal coat hangers. Even the smell was wrong. The lingering scent of old paper and lavender was buried under the aggressive aroma of expensive chemical lilies. Celeste had turned my grandmother's sanctuary into a showroom. It was generic. It was soulless. It was exactly the kind of house you would expect from people who cared more about the label on the wine bottle than the taste of the wine itself. Ember. I stiffened as Brielle materialized at my elbow. She had a glass of champagne in one hand and her phone in the other. She was glowing, vibrating with the energy of being the center of attention. "You are hiding," she accused, though she was smiling. "Come on, the lighting in the foyer is perfect right now. I want to get a picture of us." I looked at her. "A picture." "Yeah," she said, grabbing my free arm. "A sister's picture. Maybe we can go out to the driveway and pose by the car. It would be cute. Caption it. Family goals or something." I gently but firmly removed her hand from my arm. I looked at her. Really looked at her. She wasn't malicious. Exactly. She was just oblivious. She was a product of the environment my parents had curated. A plant grown in a greenhouse of narcissism. She genuinely didn't understand why posing next to a car bought with stolen inheritance money, while our grandmother lay dying, was grotesque. "I do not think so." "Brielle," I said evenly. She pouted. A practiced expression. "Don't be a killjoy." "Ember, it is a party. Everyone is asking about the car. It is a huge hit. Trevor's dad even said it was a solid choice for safety." "Safety," I repeated. The irony tasted like copper in my mouth. "Yes, it is very safe." Brielle rolled her eyes, bored by my lack of enthusiasm. "Whatever. You are such a downer. Just try to smile when we cut the cake." "Okay. For Mom." She flounced away, heading back toward Trevor, who was wearing a sweater tied around his neck in a way that made him look like a catalog model for a yacht club. I watched her go, feeling a strange detachment. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just waiting. The room began to shift. The jazz quartet in the corner stopped playing, and a hush fell over the crowd. Grant was tapping a spoon against his champagne flute. The sound was thin and sharp, cutting through the murmur of conversation. If I could have everyone's attention. Grant boomed. He stepped into the center of the room, puffing out his chest. He looked the part of the patriarch perfectly. His suit was tailored, his hair was coiffed, and his smile was wide enough to hide all the teeth. "Thank you all for coming tonight," he began. "It means the world to Celeste and me to have our dearest friends and family here to celebrate Celeste's 60th birthday." Applause rippled through the room. Celeste stepped up beside him, beaming, clutching his arm in a display of marital solidarity that I knew dissolved the moment the front door closed. "But tonight is bittersweet," Grant continued, his voice dropping to a somber, respectful register. "As many of you know, the matriarch of this home, my mother Vivian, is currently in hospice care." He paused for effect. A collective sigh of sympathy went through the room. I saw Mrs. Vaughn dab her eye with a napkin. It was a masterful performance. "However," Grant said, brightening his tone, "Vivian was adamant that we not cancel this celebration. She is a woman of immense strength and generosity, and even in her final days, she wanted to make sure the next generation was taken care of." He gestured toward Brielle, who stepped forward, looking appropriately humble. "My mother always believed in supporting family," Grant said. "She wanted to ensure that Brielle had a safe, reliable vehicle as she starts her new chapter. That car in the driveway is not just a gift from us. It is a legacy gift, a symbol of Vivian's love and her desire to see her granddaughter thrive." The applause was louder this time. Brielle hugged Celeste. Grant beamed like a man who had just donated a wing to a hospital, rather than a man who had looted a safe. It was a beautiful lie. It wrapped their greed in the soft velvet of grandmotherly love. Who could question a dying woman's wish? Who would dare suggest that the check wasn't signed with a steady hand? "Excuse me?" The voice came from the back of the room. It wasn't loud, but it was clear. The applause died down. I turned. It was Mrs. Higgins. She was a neighbor who had lived next to Vivian for 30 years. She was wearing a floral dress and holding a martini glass. She wasn't malicious, but she had the memory of an elephant and no filter. Grant smiled at her, though his eyes tightened. "Yes, Martha, Mrs." Higgins took a sip of her drink. "That is such a lovely sentiment." "Grant, really lovely, but I am a bit confused." She looked around the room, blinking innocently. "I visited Vivian just last month. Before she went into the facility, we were having tea. And she mentioned specifically that the liquidity fund, the big one, was being held for Ember." The room went dead silent. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. I hadn't planted this. This was just the natural consequence of truth. It leaked. Mrs. Higgins continued, oblivious to the tension she had detonated. "She said Ember was the one who needed the safety net. She said Brielle had you and Celeste, but Ember was on her own. So I am just wondering, did she change her mind, or is this a different fund?" The air in the room was suddenly very thin. Guests exchanged glances. The narrative was cracking. The perfect image of the benevolent, united family was showing a fissure. Grant's smile froze. He cleared his throat, shifting his weight. "Well, Martha," he said, his voice a little too loud. "You know how Vivian is. Her memory has been inconsistent lately. The medication plays tricks. We have had to make executive decisions based on the current needs of the family." Celeste stepped forward, her hand tightening on Grant's arm. Her smile was brittle, terrifying. "Martha, darling," she said, her voice dripping with ice-cold honey, "we really shouldn't bore the guests with financial minutiae. This is a party, and honestly, family finances are a private matter. Vivian's wishes are complex, and we are honoring them in the best way possible." She turned to the crowd, raising her glass. "Let us not get bogged down in details. We are here to celebrate." But the damage was done. The seed was planted. I saw Mr. Vaughn lean in and whisper something to his wife. She frowned, looking from Grant to the car outside. The shiny white Range Rover suddenly didn't look like a gift. It looked like a question mark. Grant sensed the shift. He was a salesman. He knew when he was losing the room. He needed a distraction. He needed a dazzling object to blind them again. "You know what Grant announced?" forcing a jovial tone. "Why don't we all go outside? You really have to see the car up close. The interior is Italian leather. It is a masterpiece. Brielle. Show them the features." He ushered everyone toward the French doors that led to the patio and the driveway. It was a stampede of distraction. "Look at the shiny thing. Forget the question. Look at the money." People began to move, relieved to escape the awkwardness. The herd mentality took over. I stayed where I was. I looked toward the corner of the room, near the darkened hallway that led to the study. Gordon Price was standing there. He had been there the whole time, blended into the shadows like a piece of the furniture Celeste hadn't managed to remove. He was holding his brown leather briefcase. He caught my eye. He didn't smile. He just nodded, a single, sharp dip of his chin. Now, as the guests shuffled toward the doors, chatting about leather seats and horsepower, Gordon stepped forward. "Grant." The word was spoken at normal volume, but it carried the weight of a gavel striking wood. Grant stopped. He was halfway out the door. He turned around, annoyance flashing across his face. "Gordon," he said, "I thought you left. We are moving the party outside. Grab a drink and join us." Gordon didn't move. He stood in the center of the sterilized living room, a dark figure against the beige walls. "I am not here for a drink." "Grant," Gordon said. The guests nearest to the door stopped. Curiosity is a powerful force, stronger even than the allure of Italian leather. They turned back. Gordon walked to the long dining table that had been pushed against the wall to hold the gifts. He cleared a space, pushing aside a stack of bright boxes. He placed his briefcase on the table and clicked the latches open. Snap, snap. The sound was like 2 gunshots in the quiet room. "I represent Vivian Hale," Gordon said. He spoke to the room, not just to Grant. Grant laughed, but it was a nervous, jagged sound. "We know that. Gordon, you are the family attorney, but like I told Martha, this isn't the time for business. I am not the family attorney." "Grant," Gordon corrected him. His voice was cool, precise, devoid of emotion. "I am Vivian Hale's attorney. There is a distinction, and tonight I am acting on her direct instructions." Celeste walked back into the room. Her face flushed. "Gordon, this is highly inappropriate. It is my birthday. If you have papers for Grant to sign, send them to his office on Monday." Gordon ignored her. He pulled a stack of documents from the briefcase. They were thick, bound in blue legal covers. He laid them out on the table with deliberate care. Vivian was informed about the purchase of the vehicle, Gordon said. He gestured vaguely toward the driveway, and the withdrawal of funds from the primary liquidity trust. Grant stiffened. That was an authorized withdrawal. "I have power of attorney." "We will get to that," Gordon said. He looked up, his eyes scanning the crowd. He made eye contact with Mr. Vaughn. He made eye contact with the neighbors. "But first," Gordon said, placing his hand on the top document, "Vivian wanted me to clear up a confusion that seems to be circulating tonight. A confusion about ownership." He picked up the document and held it up. "Before we celebrate the gifts you are giving with Vivian's money," Gordon said, his voice dropping to a register that sent shivers down my spine. "We need to clarify exactly who has the right to be standing in this house." The silence that followed was absolute. It wasn't just quiet. It was a vacuum. The air was sucked out of the room. Grant looked at the paper in Gordon's hand. And for the first time all night, the arrogance vanished from his face, replaced by the dawning horror of a man realizing he had been building a castle on quicksand. Gordon dropped the paper back onto the table. "Because," he said, staring directly at my father, "it is not you, Grant, and it certainly is not you, Celeste." Gordon Price did not shout. He did not need to. In a room full of people who measured power in decibels and bank account balances, Gordon wielded the quiet, terrifying authority of the written law. He held the document up, angling it slightly so the light from the chandelier caught the official seal. "This is the deed to the property located at 4502 Cardinal Lane," Gordon stated. His voice was dry, devoid of theatricality, which made the words land with the weight of stones. "For 20 years, Grant and Celeste Watson have presented themselves as the owners of this estate. They have leveraged this address for loans. They have used it as collateral for social standing." He paused, letting the statement hang in the air. "However, the deed has never been transferred. The sole owner of this property is the Vivian Hale Revocable Living Trust. Grant and Celeste Watson are listed here, in the occupancy agreement dated 19 years ago, as tenants at will." A ripple went through the crowd. It started as a murmur and grew into a buzz of shocked whispers. Tenants at will. In this zip code. That was worse than being poor. It meant you were a squatter with permission. It meant you were a guest who had forgotten to leave. I saw Mr. Vaughn, the banker father of Brielle's boyfriend, stiffen. He leaned toward his wife, his face darkening. I knew what he was thinking. If Grant lied about owning the house, what else had he lied about? What about the business deals? What about the solvency of his firm? Grant's face turned a mottled shade of red. "This is a technicality." "Gordon," he sputtered, trying to laugh it off. But the sound cracked. "My mother and I have an understanding. The house is effectively ours. The paperwork was just deferred for tax purposes." "Deferred for 2 decades?" Gordon asked, raising a skeptical eyebrow. He placed the deed back on the table and picked up the next document. "Let us discuss the understanding regarding the car." Gordon continued. He didn't give Grant time to recover. On Tuesday, a withdrawal of $180,000 was made from the trust's primary liquidity account. The memo cited medical logistics. Gordon looked at the gleaming white Range Rover in the driveway, then back at Grant, Unless this vehicle is equipped with a defibrillator and a dialysis machine, I fail to see how it qualifies as a medical expense. Under Virginia law, using a power of attorney to enrich oneself or one's immediate family at the expense of the principal is not just a breach of fiduciary duty. It is classified as financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult. The room gasped. Exploitation. Vulnerable adult. These were ugly words. These were words that ended careers and started prison sentences. Celeste surged forward, her poise shattering like glass. That is a lie. She shrieked. Her voice was shrill, echoing off the high ceilings. Vivian is sick. She is confused. She doesn't know what she is saying. She gave us permission months ago. You are twisting the words of a dying woman who is out of her mind on morphine. Gordon didn't blink. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a single sheet of paper. I anticipated that argument. Celeste. He held the paper out. This is an affidavit of competency, signed by Dr. Aris and the attending neurologist at the hospice facility, dated 48 hours ago. It certifies that Vivian Hale is fully lucid, oriented to time and place, and capable of making complex legal decisions. He dropped the paper onto the pile. It landed with a soft thwap. She knows exactly what she is doing, Gordon said coldly, and she knows exactly what you did. Grant spun around, his eyes wild. He scanned the room, looking for a scapegoat, looking for anyone to blame for the walls closing in. His eyes landed on me. You, he snarled. He pointed a shaking finger at my face. You did this. You went in there and poisoned her mind. You told her lies to turn her against us because you are jealous. You twisted everything. The accusation hung in the air. All eyes turned to me. The guests, the waiters, the neighbors. They were waiting for me to crumble. They were waiting for the good daughter to apologize, to cry, to smooth things over. I stood perfectly still. My hands were relaxed at my sides. I felt the fabric of my black dress against my skin. Cool and structured. I did not lie. Dad, I said. My voice was calm, contrasting sharply with his hysteria. I told her the safe was empty. I told her the filing cabinet was stripped, and I told her about the car. I took a step forward. I did not have to twist anything. The truth was ugly enough on its own. Grant looked like he wanted to hit me. He took a step toward me, his hands balled into fists, but he stopped when he saw the look on the faces of his guests. He saw the judgment. He saw the disgust. Gordon cleared his throat, drawing the attention back to the table of evidence. Because of this breach, Gordon announced, his voice taking on a formal, final tone. A specific clause in the Vivian Hale Trust has been activated. He picked up a thick blue binder. The Protection Against Malfeasance Clause. It states that if any acting trustee is found to have misappropriated funds or acted against the interest of the principal, their status is immediately revoked. He looked at Grant. Your power of attorney is terminated. Grant, effective immediately. The banks were notified at 4 o'clock this afternoon. The accounts are frozen. Grant went pale. Frozen Gordon nodded, and the clause triggers a secondary designation. He opened the binder to the last page. The control of the trust, including the liquidity fund, the investment portfolio, and the real estate including this house now passes to the successor trustee and primary beneficiary. Gordon looked at me, Ember Watson. The silence this time was profound. It was the silence of a paradigm shifting. I saw Brielle's jaw drop. I saw Celeste grip the back of a chair to steady herself. Me, the nurse, the invisible girl, the one they thought was just useful. Ember Celeste whispered, "That is impossible. Vivian would never." She knows Ember has no experience. She knows. She knows Ember is the only one who didn't steal from her. Gordon said sharply. He turned to Brielle. As for the vehicle, Gordon said, gesturing to the driveway, since it was purchased with stolen funds, it is considered an illicit asset of the trust. It is not your car. Brielle, it belongs to Ember, as the trustee. Brielle let out a sound that was half sob, half gasp. No, that is my car. It has a bow on it. It is for my future. She turned frantically to Trevor. Trevor, do something. Tell them they cannot do this. Your dad is a banker. Tell them. Trevor Vaughn took a step back. It was a small step, but it was a mile in social distance. He looked at his parents. Mr. Vaughn gave a subtle, imperceptible shake of his head. Trevor looked at Betrayal, his expression shifting from adoration to awkward preservation. Betrayal, this is a family legal matter, Trevor said, his voice tight. We really shouldn't get involved. But it is my car, Betrayal wailed, grabbing his arm. Trevor pulled his arm away, gently, but firmly. I think we should go. Mrs. Vaughn said. Her voice was crisp, cutting through the drama. Trevor, get the car. No, Betrayal screamed. You cannot leave the cake. The party. We will send a card. Mr. Vaughn said, not looking at Grant. I watched as the Vaughns turned and walked toward the door. They moved quickly, like rats sensing a sinking ship. Other guests began to follow, the neighbors, the business partners. Nobody wanted to be standing near Grant Watson when the legal hammer fell. Grant watched them go, his face crumbling. He looked at Gordon. You cannot do this, he whispered. You are destroying us. You destroyed yourselves. Gordon replied calmly, I am just reading the receipt. Gordon looked at his watch. You have 30 days to repay the $180,000 to the trust. Grant, if the funds are not restored, the trust will file civil and criminal charges for embezzlement. And as for the house, he looked around the foyer, at the rented furniture, at the framed photos of Celeste. Ember will decide the terms of your eviction, or your lease. That is up to her. Grant slumped against the wall. Celeste was sobbing now, sitting on the rented love seat, her face buried in her hands. Betrayal was standing in the middle of the room, alone, staring at the front door where Trevor had disappeared. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't triumph, it was relief, the weight of their lies, the weight I had been carrying for them for 29 years, was finally gone. Gordon closed the binder. He picked up a small, silver device from the table. It looked like a voice recorder. This was the legal portion. Gordon said, the facts, the figures, the consequences. He held the device up, but Vivian knew that paperwork is cold. She wanted to say something herself. She wanted to address the family directly. He looked at Grant, then Celeste, then Betrayal, and finally, he looked at me. This is just the beginning, Gordon said softly. The rest, Vivian wants to say in her own way. He pressed his thumb against the button but didn't push it yet. He waited. He let the tension build one last time. He let them sit in the wreckage of their image, stripped of their pretenses, naked before the truth. I will open this when you are ready to listen, Gordon said. Really listen. To the end. I looked at my father. He was staring at the recorder with pure terror. He knew his mother. He knew that whatever was on that tape was not going to be a lullaby. It was going to be an autopsy of their character. Play it, I said. My voice was steady. I was the trustee now. I was the one holding the cards. Gordon nodded. He pressed the button. Grant lunged. It was not a graceful movement. It was the desperate, jerky motion of a man watching his life catch fire. He scrambled across the gap between us and slammed his hand down on the recorder, just as the first crackle of static hissed from the speaker. Stop it, Grant hissed, his face inches from Gordon's. His composure was gone, stripped away like cheap paint. Do not play that. Not here, not now. He grabbed Gordon's elbow, his fingers digging into the fabric of the attorney's expensive suit. Gordon, listen to me. We need to talk. Privately. In the study. Just you and me. We can work this out. I can explain the accounting. It is a misunderstanding. A liquidity timing issue. Gordon looked down at Grant's hand on his arm. He did not pull away violently. He simply stood there, immobile as a statue, until the sheer lack of reaction forced Grant to release him. There are no misunderstandings. Grant, Gordon said. His voice was calm. but it carried to the back of the garden where the caterers were freezing in place. And we are not going to the study. We are not going behind closed doors so you can spin more webs. Vivian was very specific. Gordon continued, smoothing his sleeve. She said she wanted witnesses. She said she spent 40 years letting you hide your mistakes in the dark. She wants this one in the light. Grant looked around wildly. The guests were staring. It was the kind of stare you give a car crash horrified, but unable to look away. Gordon reached for the recorder again, but he did not press play. He simply held it, a silver grenade in his hand. I will pause this, Gordon said. For now, I will play the rest when the audience has thinned out, or when you are actually ready to listen instead of negotiate. The immediate threat of the voice was gone, but the damage was already hemorrhaging. The party was fracturing. I saw the neighbors exchanging whispers behind their hands. I saw the business partners pulling out their phones, likely checking news feeds or stock prices, wondering if the Watson toxicity was contagious. Celeste, realizing she could not control Gordon, turned her sights on the only target she felt she could still dominate, me. She marched across the room, her emerald silk dress rustling like the sound of angry wasps. She stopped 2 feet from me, her chest heaving, her face, usually a mask of heavy makeup and Botoxed calm, was twisted into something ugly and raw. Are you happy? She screamed. The sound tore through the sophisticated jazz atmosphere. Is this what you wanted? Ember, to humiliate us, to ruin my birthday. She gestured at the room, at the stunned guests, at the ruins of her social standing. I spent months planning this, she yelled. This was supposed to be my night. And you brought him here. You brought this circus. You did it on purpose because you are jealous. She was trying to build a narrative. She was trying to turn the crowd against me, to paint me as the vindictive daughter destroying the family celebration. I looked at her. I really looked at her. For the first time in my life, I did not see my mother. I saw a woman who was drowning and trying to climb on top of me to breathe. I did not ruin your birthday. Mom, I said. My voice was low, but in the silence of the room, it was perfectly audible. You did. How dare you? She spat. You chose the venue, I said, pointing to the floor. You chose to throw a party in a house you do not own, belonging to a woman you are robbing. You chose to park a stolen car in the driveway as a centerpiece. You wrote the script. Celeste, I just turned on the light so people could read it. Celeste recoiled as if I had slapped her. You are a hateful, ungrateful child, she hissed. We gave you everything. You gave me nothing. I interrupted. You gave me a roof because it was required by law. You gave me food because you didn't want the neighbors to talk. But you never gave me a family. You gave me a role, the backup plan, the nurse, the one who would change the diapers when you got old. Stop it, she shrieked. She looked around at the guests, her eyes wide and pleading. She is lying. She has always been jealous of Betrayal. She is mentally unstable. She is making this up to hurt us. She looked at Mrs. Higgins. Martha, you know her. You know how dramatic she can be. Mrs. Higgins did not smile. She set her martini glass down on a passing waiter's tray with a sharp clink. I know she's the only one who visited Vivian every day for the last 2 weeks. Celeste, Mrs. Higgins said. Her voice was cool, stripped of its usual southern warmth, and I know what a deed looks like. The papers are clear. Celeste froze. The support she expected, the blind loyalty of her social circle, was gone. They weren't stupid. They knew how money worked, and they knew how the law worked. Gordon had laid out the receipts, and no amount of crying was going to erase them. Suddenly, a commotion erupted near the French doors. I turned to see Betrayal. She was not crying anymore. She was moving with the frantic energy of a trapped animal. She had kicked off her high heels and was actually running across the patio toward the driveway. She was heading for the Range Rover. Betrayal Grant shouted, "What are you doing?" She ignored him. She reached the car, her gold dress shimmering under the floodlights. She fumbled in her purse and pulled out the key fob. She yanked the door handle. Nothing happened. She pressed the unlock button on the fob. Click, click. She pressed it again, harder. The car remained dark. The lights did not flash. The mirrors did not unfold. It sat there. A $200,000 brick. It won't open. Brielle screamed, slamming her hand against the window. It is broken. Why won't it open? She turned to the house, her face streaked with mascara. Trevor, it won't open. Help me. But Trevor was gone. It is not broken. Brielle, Gordon said. He didn't even raise his voice. He spoke from the doorway, framing the scene like a narrator. Brielle spun around. What did you do? The car is registered to the trust, Gordon explained. Or rather, the funds used to purchase it are tied to the trust. When the fraud alert was triggered this afternoon, the dealership was notified. The vehicle has been remotely disabled. It is a security feature for stolen assets. Stolen, Brielle choked out the word. It is my car. It has a bow on it. It is evidence, Gordon corrected. And until the $180,000 is returned to the estate, that car is not going anywhere. Neither are you. Not in that vehicle. Brielle slumped against the door, sliding down until she was sitting on the gravel driveway. She looked absurd and tragic, a princess whose carriage had turned back into a pumpkin before the ball even finished. Inside the house, another domino fell. Mr. Sterling, my father's longest-standing business partner, was standing near the buffet. He had been quiet until now, observing the wreckage with a calculator behind his eyes. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out, looked at the screen, and his face went the color of ash. He looked up at Grant. The look was not one of friendship. It was the look of a man who just realized he was handcuffed to a sinking corpse. Grant, Mr. Sterling said. His voice was loud enough to cut through Brielle's sobbing outside. Grant turned, desperate for an ally. Jim, please, tell them this is a misunderstanding. Tell them I am good for it. Mr. Sterling held up his phone. My CFO just called. Grant, he says our joint operating account at First National has been flagged, frozen. He says the bank received a notification of a federal audit regarding the Hale Trust. Grant's knees seemed to give way. He grabbed the back of a chair to stay upright. That is a mistake. It is temporary. Is it, Mr.? Sterling asked. He didn't wait for an answer. He pocketed his phone and signaled to his wife. We are leaving. I will have my lawyers contact you on Monday to discuss the dissolution of the partnership. Dissolution, Grant wheezed. Jim, you cannot. We have the merger next month. Not anymore. Mr. Sterling said, I cannot do business with a man who embezzles from his dying mother. Grant, the liability is too high. He walked out. He didn't even look at Celeste. That was the signal. The dam broke. The remaining guests, realizing the show was over and the contamination zone was expanding, began to flee. It wasn't a polite exit. It was an evacuation. People grabbed their coats and purses. They didn't say goodbye. They didn't thank the hostess. They just walked out, eyes fixed on the floor, avoiding the gaze of the family that had just imploded in front of them. Within 5 minutes, the house was empty. The jazz band had packed up and left through the kitchen. The caterers were silently clearing glasses. Trying to be invisible, the silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It pressed against my ears. My parents stood in the ruins of their vanity. Grant was leaning against the wall, staring at nothing. Celeste was sitting on the love seat, weeping softly, not for her mother, but for her reputation. Brielle was still outside on the driveway, hugging her knees. I stood in the center of the room. I felt tired, bone-deep tired, but I also felt clean. You know, I said quietly. The words bubbled up from a place I had kept locked for 29 years. Grant looked up. His eyes were dull. You always told me I was the practical one. I said, you told me nursing was a good job for someone like me because I was sturdy. You meant I was not pretty enough to marry rich like Brielle. You meant I was not smart enough to run the business like you. I walked over to the table where the deed lay. I heard you. Dad, when I was 12 and I wanted to go to art camp, and you told me it was a waste of investment. I heard you. Mom, when you told your friends I was the reliable one, while Brielle was the star, you treated me like an insurance policy, something you keep in the drawer just in case the real plan fails. I looked at them. They didn't argue. They didn't have the energy left to lie. Well, the real plan failed. I said, Brielle is sitting on the ground next to a car she cannot drive. Your partners are leaving. Your accounts are frozen. And the sturdy, invisible daughter is the only one standing here holding the keys to the house. Grant flinched. I am not your backup plan anymore. I said, and I am not your victim. Gordon stepped forward. He closed his briefcase. The click was loud in the empty room. I will have the formal demand letters messaged to your office tomorrow morning. Grant, Gordon said, you have 30 days to liquidate whatever you need to liquidate to repay the trust. If you do not, I will file criminal charges, and I will not hesitate to call the district attorney myself. He looked at Celeste. As for the living arrangements, Ember will let you know her decision regarding the lease. Gordon turned to me. He put a hand on my shoulder. His grip was warm, solid. You did good, kid, he whispered. I nodded. Thank you. Gordon. He walked out the front door, leaving us alone in the silence. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out. It was a text from the night nurse at the hospice. Vivian is awake. She wants to video call. Right now. She says she wants to see their faces. I looked at the phone, then at my parents. Grant was slumped like a broken marionette. Celeste was wiping her eyes. Her mascara smeared in black streaks down her face. I tapped the screen. I opened the video app. Get up, I said. My voice was hard. It was not a request. Grant looked at me. What I said, get up, I repeated. Come here, both of you, and call Brielle inside. Why? Celeste sniffled. What more do you want to do to us? I am not doing anything. I said. I held up the phone. Grandma wants to say hello. Grant went white. No, I cannot. I cannot face her. You do not have a choice. I said, you wanted her to pay for the party. Well, she is here. I walked to the French doors and opened them. Brielle. Get in here now. Brielle looked up, startled by the command in my voice. She stood up, wiping gravel from her legs, and walked slowly into the house. She looked small, defeated. Stand together, I ordered. By the fireplace, they moved like sleepwalkers. Grant, Celeste, Brielle, they stood in a huddle, stripped of their arrogance, stripped of their allies. I hit the call button. The screen connected. The image was grainy for a second. Then it cleared. Vivian was there. She was wearing her reading glasses. She was propped up on 3 pillows. She looked frail. Yes, but her eyes. Her eyes were burning with a fierce, terrifying light. She didn't speak immediately. She just looked. She looked at Grant's pale face. She looked at Celeste's ruined makeup. She looked at Brielle's trembling lip. She looked at the empty, silent house behind them. And then, from the speaker of my phone, her voice filled the room. It was not weak. It was the voice of the woman who had built the empire they had just tried to steal. Hello, family, Vivian said. Grant flinched as if she had hit him. I hope, Vivian continued, a small, cold smile playing on her lips, that you enjoyed the appetizer, because Ember is right. I am not dead yet, and we have a lot to talk about. The adrenaline that had sustained me through the party did not leave my body all at once. It drained away slowly, leaving a hollow, vibrating exhaustion in its wake. I sat in my car, parked 3 streets away from the house I had just effectively repossessed. The engine was off. The silence of the night was heavy, broken only by the sound of my own breathing. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. It was a request for a video call. Vivian. I propped the phone up on the dashboard and accepted the call. The screen filled with her face. She was back against the pillows now. The fierce light of the confrontation dimmed down to a soft, weary warmth. She looked tired, incredibly tired, but she was smiling. Are you shaking? She asked. Her voice was a whisper, intimate and knowing. I looked at my hands. They were resting on the steering wheel, trembling slightly. I could not stop them. Yes, I admitted. I feel like I'm going to throw up. I feel mean. Vivian shook her head slightly. You were not mean. Ember, you were necessary. She adjusted her glasses. peering at me through the screen. "Courage always comes with shaking," she said. "If you were not shaking, I would be worried. It would mean you did not care. The shaking means you know the weight of what you just did. You broke the cycle, honey, and breaking things takes force." I leaned my head back against the seat. Did I have to do it like that? In front of everyone? Vivian's expression turned serious. "Yes, because they thrive in the dark. Grant and Celeste rely on appearances. They rely on the polite silence of others to get away with their sins. By taking that away, by showing the world exactly who they are, you took away their power. You did not just stop them from stealing money, you stopped them from pretending." She coughed, a dry, rattling sound that made my own chest ache. "I did not do this for revenge. Ember," she said after she recovered her breath. "I know it looked like a trap, but it was a rescue mission. A rescue mission I asked. For whom?" "For you," she said firmly. "If I had died without doing this, they would have buried you. They would have taken the money, the house, the legacy. They would have kept you as their servant, their useful daughter. Forever. I had to blow up the bridge so you could finally swim to the other side." I wiped a tear from my cheek. "I think the bridge is definitely gone." "Grandma." "Good," she said. "Now go home. Sleep. Tomorrow. The real work begins." I slept for 10 hours. It was a deep, dreamless sleep. The kind that comes when your brain simply shuts down from overload. When I woke up on Sunday, the sun was streaming through my apartment blinds, indifferent to the destruction of the night before. I met Gordon Price at a diner near his office at noon. He looked fresh, wearing a polo shirt and reading the Sunday paper, as if he hadn't just dismantled a dynasty 12 hours earlier. He ordered coffee and looked at me over the rim of his cup. "So," he said, "I have drafted the demand letters. I can have them served tomorrow morning. We can give them 48 hours to vacate the property. We can file the criminal complaint for the embezzlement by Tuesday." I stirred cream into my coffee, watching the white swirl into the black. "No," I said. Gordon paused. "No, I do not want to evict them in 48 hours, I said, "and I do not want to file criminal charges on Tuesday." Gordon put his cup down. "Ember, they stole nearly $200,000. They lied to you. They gaslit you. You have every right to scorch the earth." "I know," I said, "and part of me wants to. Part of me wants to see them on the street. But that is the part of me that is hurt. That is the part of me that wants to be like them." I took a sip of the coffee. It was bitter. If I destroy them completely, I become them. I said, I become just another Hale playing power games. I want to be different. Gordon leaned back, crossing his arms. "So what is the plan?" "We give them a schedule," I said, "a repayment plan for the money. They have to pay back the full amount to the trust within 6 months. They can liquidate assets, sell jewelry. I do not care how they do it, but they pay it back. And the house Gordon asked, they can stay." I said, "For now, but not as owners, and not for free." I pulled a napkin and took a pen from my purse. "We draft a lease," I said, "a standard rental agreement. They pay market rent to the trust, monthly. If they miss a payment, they are out in 30 days, and we put a hard deadline on the occupancy. 1 year, that gives them time to find a new place, to downsize, to save face. 1 year." Gordon repeated, "You are giving them a year. I am giving them a chance to leave with dignity." I said, "Which is more than they gave Grandma." Gordon looked at me for a long time. Then, a slow smile spread across his face. "Vivian said you would do this," he said softly. "Do what? Be weak?" "No," Gordon said. "Be right. She told me. Gordon, offer her the nuclear option. She won't take it. She will choose the high road because she actually has a spine." He picked up his check. "I will draft the lease and the repayment schedule. But Ember, do not expect them to thank you. I do not want their thanks," I said. "I just want their rent." The fallout continued to rain down throughout the day. I didn't contact my parents, but the silence from their end was loud. However, the social network of Richmond is small, And news travels at the speed of text. I was at the grocery store when I ran into Sarah, a girl Brielle had gone to high school with. Usually, Sarah would look right through me. Today, she stopped her cart and looked at me with wide, fascinated eyes. "Is it true?" she whispered, leaning over the produce. "Did Brielle really get dumped?" I paused, holding a bag of apples. "I do not know. Sarah, I haven't spoken to her." "Oh, it is true," Sarah said, delighted to be the informant. "Trevor posted a story this morning, just a black screen with text, focusing on personal growth and privacy. That is influencer code for, 'My girlfriend is a liability.' And I heard the Vaughns uninvited them to the charity gala next week." I felt a pang of pity for Brielle. Not much, but a pang. Her entire identity was constructed on the foundation of being chosen by parents, by boyfriends, by society. Now, she was unchosen. She was realizing that the love she had received was conditional on her maintaining the illusion of perfection. When I got home, I checked my own phone. There was a missed call from Brielle, no voicemail. She had probably called to scream, or to beg, but had lost her nerve. Then, at 10 o'clock that night, my phone rang again. It was Grant. I stared at the screen. My stomach tightened. The old reflex, the fear of his anger, the desire to placate him flared up. But then I remembered the deed on the table. I remembered the silence of the room when he realized he owned nothing. I answered, "Hello, Dad. You think you are smart, don't you?" His voice was low, raspy. He sounded like he had been drinking. "I am not trying to be smart," I said calmly. "I am trying to be fair. Gordon is sending over the paperwork tomorrow." "Fair," he laughed, a bitter, jagged sound. "You humiliated us. You destroyed my reputation in front of Sterling, in front of Vaughn. Do you know how much business I lost last night? Millions. Ember, millions in potential contracts. You lost that business when you stole from your mother." I said, "I didn't steal it. I just stopped you from spending it. You are a child." He spat. "You do not understand how the world works. You think you have won. You have nothing. You are just a nurse with a temporary power trip. Wait until I contest the trust. Wait until I drag you through court for undue influence. I will prove you manipulated her." I listened to his threats. A week ago, they would have terrified me. Now, they sounded hollow. They sounded like the desperate flailing of a man who was falling and trying to grab onto air. "You can try." "Dad," I said, "but doctor, Aris has the competency logs. Gordon has the audit trails, and I have the truth. If you want to go to court, we can go. But remember, court records are public. Do you really want the details of the medical logistics Range Rover in the public record?" There was silence on the other end. Heavy, breathing silence. He knew I was right. He had no leverage. Take the deal. "Dad," I said softly, "sign the lease. Pay back the money. Do not make this harder than it has to be." He hung up. He didn't say goodbye. He just clicked the line dead. It was the last gasp of his authority, slamming a door that he no longer owned. The next evening, I went to the hospice. The atmosphere in the room had changed. The frantic energy of the last few weeks was gone. It was quiet now, peaceful. Vivian was awake, but she was fading. I could see it in her skin, which had taken on a grayish cast. I could hear it in the rattle of her breath. She was separating from the world, untethering herself from the drama and the noise. I pulled the chair up to the bed. I took her hand. It was cold. "You came," she whispered. "I will always come," I said. She turned her head to look at me. Her eyes were cloudy, but when they found mine, they sharpened one last time. "I am sorry," she said. I frowned. "Sorry for what?" "That I waited so long." She said, "I watched them treat you like furniture for years. I watched them overlook you, and I let it happen because I thought if I interfered, it would make it worse. I thought if I gave you money or attention, they would hate you more." She squeezed my hand, a weak flutter of pressure. "I was wrong. I should have protected you sooner. I made you fight this battle alone." I leaned down and kissed her forehead. Her skin smelled of lavender and dust. You didn't make me fight alone. I said, you gave me the weapon, and you gave me something they never did. What she breathed. You gave me value. I said, you looked at me and saw a person. You saw Ember. Not the nurse, not the backup, not the mistake. You saw me. That was worth more than the money. Grandma. That was everything. Vivian smiled. A tear leaked from the corner of her eye and tracked into her silver hair. You are the best of us. Ember, she whispered, you are the only real Hale left. She moved her hand, fumbling under the pillow. The envelope, she said. I reached into my bag. I had brought the cream-colored envelope she had pointed out in the drawer weeks ago. The one I had carried like a talisman. No, she whispered. Not that one. That one. That was the test, to see if you would keep it safe. She pulled a smaller, thinner envelope from under the pillow. It was white, sealed with Scotch tape, not wax. It looked hasty, recent. Take this, she said. I took it. It felt light. What is it? Open it when you are forced to choose again, she said. Her voice was getting very faint. I thought I already chose. I said, I chose the truth. There is always another choice, she murmured. Grant. He is stubborn. He might not pay. He might try to fight you on the lease. He might try to hurt you one last time. I looked at the envelope. If he does, she said, her eyes drifting closed. If they do not pay, if they do not learn, use what is in there. I nodded, slipping the white envelope into my pocket. I promise. She drifted into sleep then. I stayed for hours, listening to the rain start to fall outside. It tapped against the window pane, a gentle, rhythmic drumming. I thought about the lease Gordon was drafting. I thought about Betrayal alone in her room. I thought about Grant staring at his frozen bank accounts. I had offered them mercy. I had offered them a path to redemption. But as I touched the new envelope in my pocket, I realized Vivian knew them better than I did. She knew that mercy is often seen as weakness by people who only understand power. She had prepared a contingency. I stepped out into the hallway to get a coffee. Under the harsh fluorescent lights, curiosity got the better of me. Vivian had said to open it when I was forced to choose, but I needed to know what I was holding. I slid my finger under the flap of the white envelope. Inside was a single index card. On it, written in Vivian's shaky scrawl, was a short instruction. My darling Ember, if they refuse to pay, or if they try to destroy you for telling the truth, you do not need to argue. Use the recording, not the one Gordon played. The rest of it. I said everything. I stared at the card. The recording. Gordon had paused it. He had said, I will play the rest when you are ready to listen. I had assumed the recording was just a lecture, a grandmother scolding her children. But Vivian's note suggested something else. I said everything. A chill ran down my spine. What was on the rest of that tape? What could be worse than the theft and the lies exposed at the party? I put the card back in the envelope and tucked it deep into my pocket. I hoped I wouldn't have to use it. I hoped my parents would sign the lease, pay the money, and learn to live with their diminished reality. I hoped they would choose dignity. But as I walked back into the dark room where my grandmother lay dying, I had a sinking feeling that the war wasn't over. The ceasefire was temporary, and the nuclear option was still ticking in my pocket. The conference room in Gordon Price's office was designed to intimidate. It had a long mahogany table that shone like a dark mirror, flanked by leather chairs that swallowed you whole. The windows looked out over the Richmond skyline, gray and weeping with the remnants of the storm that had broken the night of the party. I sat at the head of the table. Gordon sat to my right. On the table in front of me lay the lease agreement and the repayment schedule, drafted in crisp, uncompromising legalese. The door opened, and my parents walked in. They looked like ghosts of the people they had been 48 hours ago. Grant's suit, usually tailored to perfection, looked slightly loose, as if he had shrunk inside it. His tie was crooked. Celeste was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast, hiding eyes that I guessed were swollen from crying not for Vivian, but for herself. Brielle trailed behind them, looking like a child dragged to the principal's office. She was wearing sweatpants. I had never seen my sister in sweatpants in public. They sat on the opposite side of the table. The distance between us felt like a canyon. "Let us get this over with," Grant said. His voice was rough, devoid of its usual boom. "We have read the drafts," and Gordon asked, clicking his pen. "It is impossible," Grant said. He slammed a hand on the table, but there was no force behind it. "Repaying $180,000 in 6 months. We cannot do it. Our liquidity is tied up. The accounts are frozen. We need at least 2 years." Gordon shook his head. 6 months is generous. Grant. "Most judges would demand immediate restitution. And the lease." Celeste piped up, her voice trembling. "You are charging us market rent for our own home, Ember. We have lived there for 20 years. We are family. You cannot treat us like tenants." "You are tenants," I said. I kept my voice flat, unyielding. "Actually, tenants usually have a security deposit." I waived that. That was my concession to family. Grant leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "Listen to me. Ember, we are willing to make a deal. We will pay back half." "Half," I repeated. "Yes, half," Grant said, pointing at Brielle. "Brielle is Vivian's granddaughter, too. Technically, she should be entitled to a portion of the estate. If we consider the car an early distribution of her inheritance, then we only owe the other half. It is fair. It keeps things equitable between the sisters." I looked at Brielle. She was chewing her thumbnail, refusing to make eye contact. She was willing to let them use her non-existent inheritance as a shield to protect their theft. "There is no early distribution," I said, "because there is no inheritance for Brielle in the trust. Vivian left the control to me, specifically to prevent exactly this kind of math. That is why we will contest it," Grant snapped. "If you do not agree to the 50% settlement, we will sue. We will tie this up in probate for years. You won't see a dime of rent or repayment until the lawyers take it all." He leaned back, a smirk touching his lips. It was the old Grant, the bully. He thought he found an angle. He thought he could outspend and outweight me. "You are bluffing," I said. "Am I Grant challenged? You are a nurse. Ember, you make $50,000 a year. I have retainers with firms that charge that in a week. Do you really want to go to war with me? Do you have the stomach for it?" He laughed, a dry, dismissive sound. "You don't? You are soft. You always have been. You will sign the 50% deal because you are afraid of the conflict. You are afraid of destroying the family. So just sign the paper. Ember, be the good daughter one last time." I looked at him. I looked at the man who had raised me to be a prop. He was right about one thing. I used to be soft. But he forgot that diamonds are made by applying pressure to carbon. He had applied the pressure himself. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out the small white envelope Vivian had given me at the hospice. I took out the index card, read it one last time, and then placed it on the table. Then I took out my phone. "I do not want to go to war." "Dad," I said softly. "See," Grant said, looking at Celeste. "She is folding." "But," I continued, tapping the screen, "Vivian anticipated that you would say that. She anticipated that you would try to bully me. She told me that if you refused to pay, I should play the rest of the tape." Grant frowned. "What tape?" "The lecture from the party. We heard it. She is disappointed. We get it." "No," I said. Gordon paused it. There was more. I placed the phone in the center of the table. "Vivian wanted to tell you a story," I said, "about the Sterling merger." Grant went still. His face drained of color so fast it looked like the blood had simply evaporated. "Sterling," he whispered. I pressed play. Vivian's voice filled the room. It was clearer than before. Stronger. She must have recorded this on a good day, specifically for this moment. "Hello again. Grant," the recording said. "If you are hearing this part, it means you are trying to negotiate with Ember. It means you are trying to keep the money you stole." Grant stared at the phone as if it were a bomb. "You always thought I was asleep in the afternoons." Vivian's voice continued. "But I hear things. I heard you on the phone with Jim Sterling last month. I heard you tell him that your assets were solid. I heard you tell him that you were putting up the house on Cardinal Lane as collateral for the bridge loan to close the merger. Celeste gasped. She turned to look at Grant. You did what Grant did not move. He was paralyzed. You faxed him a copy of the deed, Vivian said. But you altered it, didn't you? Grant, you removed the trust header. You presented the house as your personal property to secure a business loan. That is not just family business, son. That is bank fraud. That is federal wire fraud. And if Mr. Sterling knew that his collateral was actually owned by his partner's mother's trust, I imagine the SEC would be very interested. The recording crackled with silence for a moment. Ember has the originals, Vivian said, and she has this recording. If you do not sign the papers she puts in front of you, I have instructed her to send this audio file to Jim Sterling and the district attorney. The choice is yours. You can be broke and pay rent, or you can go to prison. Click. The recording ended. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a guillotine blade hanging suspended in the air. I looked at my father. He was shaking, visibly shaking. His hands were gripping the arms of his chair so hard the leather squeaked. He knew. He knew that this wasn't just a civil dispute anymore. This was the end of his life. Bank fraud, altering deeds. These were crimes that carried 10-year sentences. Celeste turned on him. You used the house, she whispered. You told me the merger was clean. You told me the house was safe. I had to, Grant croaked. We needed the cash flow. It was just a bridge loan. I was going to pay it back before anyone checked, but you didn't. I said, and now I know. And Gordon knows. And the phone knows. I pushed the papers across the mahogany table toward him. Full repayment. I said, 6 months, market rent lease, 1-year term, and a formal, written apology to the trust. Grant looked at the papers. Then he looked at me. There was no arrogance left in his eyes, only terror. If I sign, he whispered, you delete the tape. I do not delete anything. I said, I keep it, as insurance, as long as you pay, and as long as you leave me alone, it stays in the vault. But if you miss one payment, if you try to sue me, if you say one bad word about me in this town, I tapped the phone. I hit send. Grant picked up the pen. His hand was trembling so badly he could barely hold it. He signed the repayment agreement. He signed the lease. He pushed them over to Celeste. Sign it, he hissed. Celeste was crying. Silent. Ugly tears. She signed. Then I looked at Brielle. She was staring at me, her eyes wide and wet. Ember. She whimpered. What about me? I cannot live there if they are broke. I have no money. Trevor left me. I have nothing. Can't you help me? Just a little. I looked at my sister, the girl who had laughed while I worked, the girl who had posed next to the stolen car. I am helping you. Brielle, I said, how she asked, hopeful. I am letting you learn how to support yourself. I said, it is the only gift anyone has ever given you that is actually real. I stood up. I picked up the signed documents and handed them to Gordon. File them, I said. I picked up my phone and the white envelope. I didn't look back at my family. I walked out of the conference room, down the long hallway, and into the elevator. I drove straight to the hospice. The sun was trying to break through the clouds, casting a pale, watery light over the trees. I walked into the facility, nodding at the nurse at the front desk. She gave me a sad, soft smile. I knew before I reached the room. The door was open. The room was quiet. The monitor was off. Vivian was lying in the bed, her hands folded over her chest. She looked small. She looked still, but she did not look in pain. I walked to the side of the bed. I did not cry, not yet. I felt a profound, heavy peace settle over me. I sat down in the chair where I had spent so many evenings. I took her hand. It was already cooling, but the skin was still soft. I did it. Grandma, I whispered. They signed. It is over. I imagined her opening her eyes. I imagined that sharp, blue gaze. I imagined her saying, "Are you shaking?" I wasn't shaking anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the white envelope. I laid it on the bedside table next to her glasses. You were right. I told her silence. I didn't beat them. I didn't crush them. I just stopped letting them crush me. I sat there for a long time, watching the light change on the wall. I thought about the house on Cardinal Lane. It was mine now. The trust was mine. The future was mine. But looking at Vivian's face, I realized that the inheritance wasn't the assets. The inheritance was the spine she had helped me grow. The inheritance was the ability to walk into a room of wolves and not flinch. The inheritance was the realization that I was not a backup plan. I was the architect. I stood up. I kissed her forehead one last time. Goodbye. Vivian, I said, and thank you. I walked out of the room. I walked down the hallway, past the nurse's station, past the waiting room where families were huddled in their own private griefs. I pushed open the heavy glass doors of the facility. The night air hit me. It was cool and crisp. The storm had passed completely now. The sky was clear, studded with stars that looked like diamonds scattered on black velvet. I walked to my car, my old, reliable sedan. I got in and started the engine. I didn't look back at the hospice. I put the car in gear and drove out onto the main road. For the first time in 29 years, I didn't know exactly where I was going. I didn't have a schedule. I didn't have a command from my mother or a shift at the clinic. I had a full tank of gas. I had a voice. And I had the road. I drove into the night, light as a feather, heavy with strength. Finally free. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I hope Ember's journey gave you the same satisfaction it gave me to write. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe winding down for the night? Let me know in the comments below so we can connect. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Helena Revenge Stories, like the video, and smash that hype button to help this story reach more people who need a little reminder that the truth always wins. Stay strong, and see you in the next one.